Good evening everybody. We are talking about the different sulfur compounds starting from your sulfuric acid, and now we have moved to some compounds where we can have sulfur and chlorine bonds. And last time what we have seen is that you can have two sulfur and on the both two ends you can have two chloride, that means the compound is disulfide dichloride. Now, if we see that also we have seen that the sulfur dichloride, that means it is HCl2. So, how we get that particular HCl2 compound is very important, because we have the source of the sulfur, the elemental sulfur, and we have the source of chlorine as the chlorine gas. So, this is also produced in a nicer way, that by reacting liquid sulfur dichloride, disulfur dichloride, what we have prepared earlier. So, we have seen that how we can make direct reaction of chlorine and S8 or S2, that means the elemental sulfur, for the production of H2Cl2, not this HCl2. So, from there basically if we take out one of the sulfur atom from that molecule, we will get HCl2. So, what we do that reaction of sulfur disulfur dichloride with excess of chlorine. That means, you have to either remove sulfur or you add more chlorine in terms of their molecular stoichiometry. So, if we do the same reaction with chlorine gas with H2Cl2 at low temperature in the presence of some catalysts. We all know that where we are converting your SO2 to SO3, we have seen some particular type of metal oxide catalyst, which is vanadium pentoxide. Now, we will see that simple iodine, the elemental iodine I2 is useful for this particular conversion. So, we require the presence of that particular catalyst for the typical conversion of disulfur dichloride to sulfur dichloride. So, what we do? We basically taking away of one of the sulfur atom from the H2Cl2, which we have seen also earlier, that you have sulfur-sulfur bond, and on the two ends you have the two chloride groups attached to these two sulfur. Now, if we get sulfur dichloride, which is very much similar to that of your water molecule, that means water we know that oxygen is present and you have two hydrogen atoms attached to that oxygen center. Now, instead of that particular sulfur, what we will see afterwards also during the preparation of your hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide is of similar type, that where sulfur is the central atom and you have two hydrogen atoms attached to that particular sulfur. Here the sulfur is attached to two chloride, so you get that particular sulfur dichloride. And it has also different kinds of applications, and that is why we prepare it for different purposes, and sometime for the introduction of sulfur we use some sulfur bearing compounds for the introduction of that sulfur in some big backbone, that means big structure of organic molecules or some polymeric structures. So, here we will take the example of one application for the manufacture of thionyl chloride and in sulfidizing and chlorination reactions, what we have seen also earlier in case of your H2Cl2 molecule. So, why we produce another kind of this particular molecule is also interesting to know, because the reactivity pattern for these two compounds, that means H2Cl2 versus HCl2, can be different. And one such application is the thionyl chloride preparation, because we use huge amount of thionyl chloride for the laboratory purpose, also for organic transformations, for the chlorination reaction, simple chlorination reaction. Sometimes we also use that for your acid chloride preparations. So, COOH, if you have RCOH, it can be directly converted to RCOCl with the use of thionyl chloride, and also in sulfidizing and chlorination reactions, that means introduction of sulfur or introduction of chlorine in some reactions. So, here now we will see that what is that particular thionyl chloride. So, we have H2Cl2 already we have seen, now we see today is HCl2, now it is thionyl chloride. That means you get some compound where compound is SOCl2. So, you have H2Cl2, SCl2, now we get some compound which is SOCl2. So, what is this now? That instead of that, the molecular formula wise they are also very similar. That means, instead of one sulfur in H2Cl2, we have one oxygen and one sulfur. But the connectivity wise it is completely different. It is very much similar to that of your sulfur dichloride with extra sulfur oxygen bond. So, if you consider there are many pathways or many reactions which can ultimately lead to this particular sulfur oxychloride, we can say, or we can consider is as the thionyl chloride. So, because one other version of this type of molecule we know, that is also known as the sulfuryl chloride, that we will also see, which is SO2Cl2. So, sulfur is there. If you have two sulfur oxygen bond, you get sulfuryl chloride. If you have one sulfur oxygen bond or particular one end and other end you have the two chloride groups starting from your SCl2. So, what we see that if you have SCl2, so sulfur is here and 2 Cl. So, sulfur is forming one bond over there. That means, it is the corresponding addition of sulfur, that means it is basically a sulfoxide formation. So, this is sulfoxide formation and for the other compound it is the sulfone formation. So, if we consider that your SCl2 molecule, the sulfur dichloride molecule is similar to that of our any organic molecule, where you have a sulfur as the center and two carbons are attached to that particular center, we consider that particular molecule as the thioether. So, very interestingly, that particular thioether having two lone pair of electrons on it, that particular thioether sulfur you can add or you can transfer oxygen from some other source like hydrogen peroxide or iodosyl benzene or metachloropar-benzoic acid. We can transfer that oxygen to the sulfur center, making it SOCl2. So, these are all the different types of reactions or the reactivity pattern on say simple SCl2 type of molecule. So, if we consider that our goal is that converting this SCl2 to SOCl2. So, it is basically a question posing to you that how you can convert the first two examples, which are sulfur dichloride, and the third and fourth examples are the conversion of disulfur dichloride, the first species what we discussed last time in our previous class. So, these two how you convert to SOCl2. So, we should supply something which can transfer oxygen to that particular center. So, in the first case it is a simple reaction of sulfur dioxide gas with that of your sulfur dichloride, that only will not give you the desired product, that means your SOCl2, because you require more amount of Cl2. So, you have to use corresponding chlorine gas as the extra source. So, in between what you can have one end you have the source of oxygen donor or the oxygen donor molecule should be available, and some other end you can have the corresponding Cl2, that means the source of the chlorine. So, reaction of these two along with your SCl2 or H2Cl2 will give you 4 different ways of making thionyl chloride. So, sulfur dioxide plus HCl2 in presence of chlorine will giving you 2 molecules of thionyl chloride. In the second case, more oxygen bearing molecule, that means sulfur trioxide, because if we consider that some industry is producing some excess of sulfur dioxide or we are burning some amount of sulfur to sulfur dioxide or trioxide. So, that gas outlet or the excess amount of that particular two gases, that means sulfur dioxide and trioxide, can be consumed in presence of your extra chlorine gas by sulfur dichloride, monosulfur dichloride, to make your thionyl chloride. So, first two reactions are therefore is a direct reaction of conversion of sulfur dichloride to thionyl chloride. And the next two, again we are using either sulfur dioxide or sulfur trioxide, but Now our substrate is disulfur dichloride in presence of chlorine again, giving you 4 molecules of thionyl chloride in the first case and 3 molecules of thionyl chloride in the second case. So, the basic strategy for all these 4 different types of reactions are same. In all these cases, either we are using sulfur dichloride, monosulfur dichloride or disulfur dichloride. You have to have some oxygen donor. So, we are using 2 types of oxygen donor molecules, which one is sulfur dioxide and sulfur trioxide, and in presence of some excess or the required amount of chlorine gases. So, these processes basically, if we consider that you have 4 different processes and the reactions are all in taking place in gas phase in continuously operated plants with an activated charcoal as the catalyst. So, in all these reactions, particularly all the industrially important conversions or all the industrially important reactions, what we see, to increase the yield of the reaction or the amount of conversion for a particular type of reaction, if the reaction is not very useful in going towards the maximum side towards the right, that means the percentage conversion is less, we always use the catalyst such that we can have a good amount of conversion from the left to right. That means say 70% or 80% conversion will take place when we go for the reactions of 2 component or 3 component reactions. So, earlier we have seen that vanadium pentoxide can be your catalyst, iodine can be your catalyst, now your charcoal. So, the charcoal powder or the charcoal dust. So, you have a huge surface on it and the gas is also flowing on the surface of that charcoal. So, charcoal powder is basically giving you something where you have the activated surface area and the gas molecules are adsorbed on it and you get the required conversion. So, on that particular surface, each and every carbon center is basically trapping that particular SO2 or SO3 molecules, and 2 other species, basically 3 component reactions, it is A plus B plus C giving you only one product, which is your D. So, charcoal catalyzed reactions for all these 4 cases can be useful for producing thionyl chloride. So, what we can see that depending upon your activity of that particular catalyst, we have a particular amount of conversion where you do not expect that all the sulfur dioxide whatever we are using in terms of your molecular stoichiometry by molar ratio is not fully converted to the product side. So, you can have some unreacted sulfur dioxide or some sulfur dioxide produced as a byproduct in some other reactions, not this particular reaction, is converted in the gas phase with chlorine to SO2Cl2 now, which is little bit more easier because you directly use chlorine gas to trap it as SO2Cl2, which is your sulfuryl chloride. So, we cannot lose or we should not allow to go the excess amount of sulfur dioxide or sulfur dioxide from all other sources in the air. We should trap it for some value added compound, which is your sulfuryl chloride, and direct reaction of chlorine of that particular sulfur dioxide can give you very quickly your sulfuryl chloride. So, what we see then that the different types of other particular reactions that you can have these thionyl chloride or sulfuryl chloride for the chlorination reactions or some other reactions also. Then we just introduce something, the halogenated sulfonic acid groups. So, if you have the sulfuric acid, then the corresponding sulfonic acid function, which is your SO3H function. Then if we attach it to some halogen X, so we get the chlorosulfonic acid. And how we get that particular reaction? So, just now we have seen how we make SOCl2, how we make SO2Cl2. Now, instead of that, now we have Cl. Cl is attached to that particular part and is produced by the reaction of liquefied sulfur trioxide with HCl or the gas phase reaction of SO3 from a catalyst tray contact in sulfuric acid plants, because in sulfuric acid plants we are handling sulfur dioxide for making sulfur trioxide, which is absorbed by water. So, there are catalyst trays, and those catalyst trays contact can be utilized for this particular conversion also. Only thing that you have to introduce HCl as a gas, and with an excess of dry hydrogen chloride at high temperature. So, the reaction for this particular conversion is high enough, and at high temperature you must have the dry, no moisture, no water vapor in it. So, dry hydrogen chloride can react with sulfur dioxide, giving you chlorosulfonic acid. Where we use this particular chlorosulfonic acid? In organic synthesis and now in sulfonation. Earlier we have seen that thionyl chloride or sulfuryl chloride can be used for chlorination of your carboxylic acids, but now we can go for sulfonation of long chain aliphatic alcohols. Previously we have seen that we can have some useful molecule which are industrially important, which can produce in a large scale, and it has a huge market also, like that of your different surfactant molecules, the detergents, different types of detergents which are long chain aliphatic molecules, and at the end you have the sulfate functions such as your SDS molecule, sodium dodecyl sulfate. So, it is a sodium salt, and sulfate is your typical corresponding anionic part, and is a dodecyl part, that means 12 carbon bearing long chain aliphatic chain is there, which is obtained from a typical alcohol which is also readily available, which is your lauryl alcohol. So, sulfonation of all these long chain aliphatic alcohols can be achieved by chlorosulfonic acid. Now, the next example of this particular chlorosulfonic acid is the fluoro one. That means, instead of Cl attached to the sulfur end of the sulfonic acid function, now you have the fluorine end which is attached to the sulfonic acid group, and that sulfonic acid group now can be attached to the fluorine as a corresponding part. So, is produced by feeding now liquid hydrogen fluoride, like your HCl, the hydrochloric acid. Now, your hydrofluoric acid is introduced with cooling into a solution of sulfur trioxide in some amount of fluorosulfonic acid. So, what we do? We take sulfur trioxide which is dissolved in already available fluorosulfonic acid for producing more amount of fluorosulfonic acid, such that we react basically that sulfur trioxide. So, sulfur trioxide is on the already available fluorosulfonic acid. So, fluorosulfonic acid is your base or your solvent, and that fluorosulfonic acid containing sulfur trioxide, excess sulfur trioxide will be directly reacting with HF, giving you the corresponding fluorosulfonic acid. So, that is forming in a nicer way, that will be a very useful reagent. That means, your chlorosulfonic acid, your fluorosulfonic acid for some other purpose, not for sulfonation, because the chlorosulfonic acid we have seen it is utilized for sulfonation. Earlier we have seen that your disulfur dichloride or sulfur dichloride is utilized for chlorination, or thionyl chloride is also another product from there. Thionyl chloride or sulfuryl chloride is used for the chlorination of organic carboxylic acids or long chain carboxylic acids. Now, a useful reaction mechanism what gives you the fluorination of typical inorganic or organic molecules, because the fluorine is a very useful molecule atom to be introduced in some complex pharmaceutical molecules in dry and in drug and medicinal industry, pharmaceutical industry. We get the corresponding molecules, and some of the molecules are fluorinated. So, a safer way of going for this fluorination reaction is using that fluorosulfonic acid, not by your sodium fluoride or ammonium fluoride, or not by direct hydrofluoric acid, but by this particular sulfonic acid. So, it will be useful for both organic as well as inorganic substrate, but also in the manufacture of sulfofluorides, some more complex sulfofluoride molecules or sulfonic acids you can have, and those sulfonic acids can also be prepared from your fluorosulfonic acid. And as a catalyst for alkylation and polymerization reaction, some very low concentration of this fluorosulfonic acid can also be utilized for alkylation reaction. That means, alkene can go for some alkylation reactions of polymerizations or some long chain organic molecule formation. So, these can also function as a good catalyst, not as your fluoroacetic acid or any other fluorine bearing acid, but is a different type of acid which can be considered as a typical inorganic acid, inorganic mineral acid, which is your fluorosulfonic acid, and also it is used in polishing of lead crystal glasses, because the fluorine we know that it can etch the surface. So, it is polishing that, but your concentration of this available fluorine is also less, unlike your sodium fluoride or hydrofluoric acid. So, this can also be utilized for polishing your lead crystal glasses. Now, we will go for sulfurous acid bearing different salts. So, we have seen that how we can get sulfuric acid. We can also see when sulfur dioxide is being trapped by water molecules, we get H2SO3, which is nothing but your sulfurous acid. Now, how we can convert it to some corresponding acids, that means sulfurous acid salts, whether you can get the sodium salt of sulfurous acid, potassium salt or ammonium salts, because sometimes we will find that these are not produced directly from the free acids. Whether we should go for preparing sulfurous acid first and then go for the different salts, because these salts are very useful for making more and more complex other sulfur bearing inorganic salts. So, sulfurous acid salt, one such example is sodium hydrogen sulfide. It has huge application for typical laboratory based reactions in organic and inorganic chemistry laboratories, as well as in the food chemistry, or sometimes it can also be useful in some agriculture also. So, is a hydrogen sulfide, that Na plus HSO3 minus. So, is a bisulfite ion bearing salt, that means we are getting it from sulfurous acid. So, sodium hydrogen sulfide, how you make it? We can make it either from a mixture of sulfur dioxide with sodium hydroxide, or we can get it from sodium sulfide. Because bisulfide is a bisalt, we can get it from simple sodium sulfide or the direct reaction of sulfur dioxide with sodium hydroxide. Or we can also produce this type of salt, the sodium disulfide is Na2H2O3, not A5, O5 is also another category. But the first thing what we can go like that sodium disulfide or sodium thiosulfate we consider, and disulfide is also, if we consider it, is that some more number of oxygen groups are attached to it, is produced also by reacting sulfur dioxide with 50 to 70% of NaOH in saturated sodium hydrogen sulfide solution. So, again just now what we have seen, that if we can use the product material as the corresponding base or as the corresponding solvent or as the medium, we can go some simple reactions where the reactant is reacting with some amount of acid or the base. So, if you have a hydrogen sulfide solution, that means your NaHSO3 solution, on it you can go the same reaction, that means the reaction of SO2 with NaOH. And when the reaction is over, you go for saturation, the concentrated solution you have to make, and it is isolated from the resulting suspension if the product is forming over there by centrifugation. That means you use for using the centrifugal force for that. So, you use for that particular purpose the centrifuge. So, centrifugation, and finally, it is dried in a dry atmosphere in desiccator or in air oven. So, these salts basically starting from your sulfurous acid or any other thing, that means you can have a bisulfite salt which can be produced from a sulfite salt or a H2O5, or we can see also we can produce it for thiosulfate, which is H2O3 type of salt. So, H2O5 type of salt, H2O5 2 minus anion bearing salt or H2O3 2 minus anion bearing salt, where you have more and more number of oxygen, but you can have two sulfur-sulfur bonds present in it. So, in photographic industry they are very useful, also they are useful in paper industry, in textile industry and in leather industry. In leather industry these sulfur bearing salts are useful for removing the hairs of the animal skin, and in textile industry also you can have something for as a reducing agent or sometime for getting the sulfur dyes. The sulfur bearing dyes we can make, and that sulfur bearing dyes can be utilized for your incorporation or the dyeing for that particular textile. Then paper industry is also it is bleaching, or sometimes it is simply reducing the material for that particular purpose. And photographic industry also we know that the silver thiosulfate type of thing we know it for the fixing material. So, when sodium sulphide directly, that means Na2SO3 is produced by reacting that sulfur dioxide containing gases with sodium hydroxide in a saturated again sodium sulphide solution at 60 to 80 degrees centigrade. So, if can go for direct conversion of sulfur dioxide to your sodium sulphide. So, whatever sulfur dioxide you can have, you can get it by burning your sulfur as sulfur dioxide, and that sulfur dioxide can be converted to your typical sodium sulphide, which is a very useful reducing agent for some reduction reactions in all industrially available reactions where we use sodium sulphide. So, it can be used as a very good reducing agent, and also in the manufacture of thiosulphate, manufacturing procedure for the thiosulphate as an oxidation prevention agent. That means, again you can maintain a reducing atmosphere for that particular purpose, and is the oxidation prevention agent for developer solutions in the photographic industry. So, is a very good fixing material for reduction reactions. So, we have to see now that how we get this, that SO2 you have, which can be very easily converted to SO3. That means, sulfur is there and you can attach 3 oxygen atoms on that particular sulfur, making you SO3 2 minus, which is your sulphite ion. If one hydrogen is still present in it, we get bisulphite ion HSO3 minus. Now, in case of your S2O3 2 minus, which will be the anion of your sodium thiosulphate, by the introduction of some extra sulfur center or extra sulfur atom to your thiosulphate unit, we get it. And it is also prepared as anti-chlorination agent. That means, if you have some extra chlorine in it, or you have to remove some amount of chlorine in the paper and textile industry, always we know that in paper and textile industry some material is always used as a bleaching agent, like your sodium hypochlorite. So, these bleaching agents are mostly chlorine based agents. So, you have to go for this anti-chlorination or dechlorination reaction. That means, you have to remove the chlorine from that particular material, that means which is being trapped in paper or which is being trapped in the textile. So, we can get it out of that. So, if you just simply go for a typical reaction, which is a reduction reaction using this sulfur based corresponding salts, and also for the preservation of food material, that is why it is useful in the food industry or doing some good amount of food chemistry and in the treatment of boiler water. That means, if you have something present as a oxidizing agent, so that particular oxidizing agent, that means if we have some excess oxygen or some peroxides or some chlorine, chlorine is also a oxidizing agent, which is also a bleaching agent. That is why it is going for bleaching action on paper and textile, which is destroying or decaying that particular dye or the coloration which is unwanted. So, that can be removed by simply going for a reduction reaction using all these sulfur dioxide based salts. So, these sulfur based salts are nothing but your sulfur dioxide based salts, and as we all know that sulfur dioxide gas itself is a reducing agent, and that sulfur dioxide gas, if you just simply purge that particular sulfur dioxide gas, because in all these cases in slightly acidic medium, in very dilute acid condition, or in water medium, it can produce sulfur dioxide. So, that sulfur dioxide is a very good bleaching agent for decolorization, even for the petal of the flowers or any other thing. So, if you can produce this, so you can remove the chlorine, you can go for removal of excess chlorine from this paper and the textile industry, and also preservation of the food, because food is getting spoiled by the presence of its oxidation equivalent, that means oxygen or any other oxidizing agent. So, if you are able to remove those as a reducing agent, your food material will be safe. So, your reduction, so this can also be sodium bisulfite, can be a very good food preservative, which is allowed food preservative. And for the treatment of boiler water, if the boiler water has dissolved chlorine, or if the boiler water has some other oxidizing agent which can corrode the corresponding mechanism for your boiler life, or some other procedure where you using the boiler water, that can be destroyed. So, your boiler water should also be safe from your oxidizing agent. So, your all these sulfur based salts, that means your sulphite salts or the thiosulfate, can be used. So, in the next class we will just see how we can synthesize sodium thiosulfate. Okay. Thank you very much.